As an avid Corrado enthusiast, I'm often asked, Doogie, I'd like to buy a Corrado. Where can I get one? How much should I spend? I hear they break a lot. What's broken all the time? Well, if you have a burgeoning wallet, I have a manhole cover you can slide over and dump it right down on into. Today, we're going to take a look at the Corrado. If you're on the fence about purchasing a Corrado, I say go for it. There is no better way to teach yourself the laws of mechanics than to have a Corrado. I got my first one when I was 17, and it's contributed significantly into who I am today. On this particular Corrado, there's actually not a lot of rust. This is a Minnesota car, and it's pretty clean, I got to admit. This particular color is flash red, I believe. And on Volkswagen red, there's no clear coat. So if you see one of these and it's mostly pink, as long as it hasn't been cleared and the clear's peeling or anything obvious like that, this can buff up really nice. Another thing about Corrados is most of all of them come with sunroofs, and it never works. So in the early 90s, if you wanted one without, you had to special order it that way. And as a result, ones without the sunroofs are quite rare. And it does give you a bit more headroom when you don't have it, but they're always broken. Luckily, there's some solutions like using one out of a Volkswagen Passat. You can actually swap in the moonroof glass and the moonroof assembly, a conversion that is well detailed on the internet. This particular one has the factory BBS wheels. Looks like we've got some cross-drilled rotors. These things handle very well. This was Road & Track magazine's one of the best handling front-wheel drive cars of the 90s, and they're a blast to drive. They're inherently expensive to maintain. These cars came in two flavors, G60 and SLC. SLC stands for Sport Luxury Coupe. The G60 is a 1.8 liter four-cylinder supercharged engine, and this has the 2.8 liter VR6. The six-cylinder is the desirable one to go for. They are a little bit more reliable, but as far as G60 versus VR6 goes, G60 is kind of a nickel and dime thing when it breaks. VR6 is quite expensive when it breaks, usually anyway. They all have a central locking system, and when the car's locked, the fuel filler flap will lock as well. So if you can't open this and you can't find the button, unlock the car. Sometimes you have to go around to the passenger side and do it because the switch wears out on the driver's side that senses the key in the keyhole. And then you can unlock it. If you can't get in here for any reason, you can open the hatch and reach in behind here and actually pull the little tab to open the fuel door. This has an aftermarket gas cap on it, but the factory one would have two little tabs so you could actually hang it on the fuel door. It's got a bit of attitude to it, and some interesting features that were unique to the early 90s. One of which is active aero. This has a spoiler that goes up at 45, 47 miles an hour and retracts at about 15. A lot of people say this is mostly for show, but seasoned Corrado owners will tell you that this does make a difference on the highway on a windy day. Keeps the car planted. You can't really find parts in abundance for these anymore, but there are some great Corrado classifieds in Facebook. There's a strong Corrado community that can always network you with parts or somebody that has the parts. And you know, there's a lot of DIY that goes into these as well. There's stuff that you just simply can't find anymore, and so it takes a certain creative intuition to get parts off of another car or even come up with something on your own to fix it and make sure that it works right and it lasts. They're very rewarding cars to drive. They're very rewarding cars to work on. This license plate tub here, they always break away on here. There's actually some clips that are supposed to hold this to here, along with some double-sided sort of adhesive trim tape. and they break off, they fall off because it gets picked up from here or something gets pushed into it, and this plastic is aging and brittle and can break. And luckily, there's a company that makes a replacement from Spoon-Fed Tuning. I highly recommend them for stuff like this. They have a cover for the rain tray and like some nice door sill pieces and stuff, and you can get a good quality reproduction from Spoon-Fed. So these taillights are the factory units, and they do actually have several different taillight options for this car. The clear, all clear would be my personal preference. It's not uncommon to smoke these, and on the factory lights, only the outer work. The inner reverse light works, but this lens isn't used for anything unless you're in Europe. You have the European model, and then there's actually a fog light that goes on the one side. But what I do, and I recommend this to most Corrado owners, is you can actually put a pair of bulbs in there, like you knock out the blanking plate, the bulb holder's already there. You put in the bulb and then you wire it to the third brake light there in the center, so you actually have 4 main brake lights instead of just the outside 2. I like getting people's attention that I'm stopping. Another thing worth mentioning on these is these roof molding strips. If you're trying to keep a nice car, it's important to acquire a car that has these in good shape, because if you can find replacement ones, they're $600, and people line up to pay that price. So having good roof moldings is important if you want a clean Corrado. Another thing is these door moldings on the sides here. There's no mounting holes or anything, they're just stuck on, so you can peel them right off. So that's your preference, but they don't really protect the door. This body line here is actually sticking out further than what the molding is, so the majority of your dings and dents from shopping carts and other drivers is going to be right here in this door area. On the front of this particular Corrado, I see we've got the badgeless grille. The G60 ones had more slats in the grille. The VR6 ones had this sort of 3-bar design, but usually there's a badge here in the center. Personally, I like the badgeless. These headlights, these are the factory US headlights, and if you've ever driven a Corrado at night, you'll know that you can't tell the difference between whether they're off or on. So if you're considering buying a Corrado, one of your priorities, especially if you like to drive at night, is upgrading the headlights. I recommend the European spec headlights. That's usually what everybody goes with, and that can run you between $300 and $500 for a decent pair of headlights, and that's not including HIDs or any other options you might want to go with. Another thing worth noting is the turn signals. On the G60 cars, these were actually an orange lens, and they moved to the more tasteful and elegant clear lens on the later cars. But if it was 1994 and you were a G60 owner distraught about your ugly orange turn signals, it was easy as walking up to the car and running off with it. And they still got their bulbs, so it's all good. There are places online that you can still get parts. There's actually a couple of Corrado classifieds on Facebook that just deal with cars and parts for the cars. And the community out there is great. People are always willing to field questions and help you with whatever issue you have, and there are a lot of quirky issues on these cars. These seat belts, they always malfunction. Sometimes the motor doesn't work, sometimes it jumps the track, sometimes the cable inside breaks, sometimes the switches go bad. On this particular car, the switches have sort of failed and the seat belt just randomly moves and everything else. Usually what happens is it'll break and it stops in its forwardmost position, and then you smack your head on the thing whenever you're trying to get out of the car or whatever. Luckily, VW thought a little bit about this in advance, and they actually included an auxiliary place to latch the shoulder belt onto. So in the C-pillar here, there's a vertical rectangular cover, and you pop that off, and then the little hook comes out that you can clip the shoulder belt into, and then you have a static place that's safe to use the shoulder belt, and then you can actually remove this out of its track so you don't smack your head on it every time you get out. Now, on the lap belt in a Corrado, typically when you use this, you unbuckle it and then it flops back like this, and you notice the tang is pointing outward. Well, this presents a problem in Corrados because when you shut the door, the tang hits the door card and punches a hole in your door panel. That's no good. And so one of the typical procedures when entering and exiting a Corrado for me is I take this and I keep it on the inside, and it tucks in there perfectly. And so the tang doesn't have to stick out and poke you or anything. It actually just fits right down in there, and that ensures that as you get out, you won't brush across it and point it outwards and punch a hole in your door card. If you look at a Corrado that's got quite a few miles on it, almost certainly you'll find a seatbelt punch or two in the door. These window regulators in the Corrado, they're quite strange. First of all, this is the only car I'm aware of that will allow you to roll down only one window at a time. But at least it has one touch roll down on both sides, and it seems to remember the decision you've made when you've wanted to do that. So if I roll down this window and I push the button for that window, it'll remember to roll down that window. So that's kind of nice, but also quirky. The window regulators in a Corrado are inherently unreliable. I've had at least 3 in each door of any of my cars, and there is a company that does make an aftermarket replacement, and it's more reliable than the factory units, just a little bit more slower because it's a screw drive type instead of the cable drive that the Corrado came with. Now, all Corrados are equipped with central locking, which means that this keyhole will lock all of the doors, the fuel filler flap, as well as the hatch. And 92 and later, you also get an alarm. And so it's important to unlock this car before you open the hood or anything like that to keep from setting off the alarm. But one real convenient feature is that if it's a hot summer day and it starts to rain, you don't have to get in the car to roll up the windows. You just simply insert the key in the door and hold it to the lock position, and it closes the window up for you. And on 93 and later models, it'll also close the sunroof for you. Oh my goodness. So this is the 2.8 liter VR6. This is a V6 and an inline 6 at the same time. They do that by staggering the cylinders, and it allows you to package a 6-cylinder engine into a 4-cylinder engine space. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of room here. Most of us find that the room in back is ample for a large turbocharger, and that's the route that I usually go. This particular one's got a short ram intake. This just kind of heats the air. If you do one of these and you have a Golf or any other VR6 car, taking a day and finding some sheet metal, maybe you got an old computer case laying around, that's what I used on mine, and you just wall this off here so you can pull air from down. This used to be where the charcoal canister sat, and so you can pull air from there. You can actually plumb it on through and have a cold air intake if you like sucking up water when it rains. But making a box for this and just having that temperature difference to get cold air up into here makes a significant difference. One of the biggest things to look out for when you're considering purchasing a VR6 is the timing chains. Now, the timing chains are on this side of the engine. They're actually right under this section of the valve cover here. And this is the transmission side of the engine. So if these chains have to be serviced for any reason, you're pretty much guaranteed to remove the transmission to be able to perform that service. And the way that you check them is you start the engine and you listen to it at idle and then maybe at like 1100 RPM, and you want to listen for like a churning sort of grinding noise from this side of the engine, and you'll know it when you hear it. It's a very definitive sound when compared to the rest of the engine. And the other thing that you'll want to look out for on these engines is coolant leaks. There's a water pipe that runs across the front of the engine just underneath the intake manifold here. It's called the crack pipe. Kind of looks like one, I guess. It's known for leaking. The thermostat housing is just under these sensors here, and that's known to leak as well. So it's important to make sure that stuff doesn't leak. At this point, these all have enough miles. You want to make sure the service was recently done. And If you have to do it yourself or get in there for any reason, go ahead and replace the thermostat with a low temp one. Getting one that opens at 160 instead of like 180, 170 does improve the oil temperature significantly. You'll often see water on the passenger side floorboard. And a lot of people wonder, oh, maybe the sunroof's leaking or the seal's bad. No, usually it's a lot more simple of a fix than that. This is the rain tray area, or scuttle panel for you European folks. And you can see there's a lot of forested stuff left in here. And there's drain holes, like on the front side on the ends, and these drain holes often get clogged with this debris. And once those clog and it rains and the water runs down the windshield, it enters where the heater actually picks up, which is under this cover down here. And once water pools there, it leaks into the heater box, and then the heater box can't shuttle it out through the condensate drain fast enough, so it ends up on the floor. Same with the sunroof drains. There are 4 drains in this car that also have to be cleaned on a regular basis. Those two things together are the most common reasons why you would see water inside your Corrado. This is the power steering fluid reservoir. And usually how I check any of the fluid levels is I give the car a little bit of a shake, and you can see the fluid jiggling around right about here. An important thing to note with the power steering on the later VR6 cars is they do not use a regular power steering fluid. You need to go to the auto parts store and buy the European equivalent. It's called CHF 11S is what they typically stock at the auto parts store for that. I believe Prestone now actually makes a product for European vehicles, but the CHF 11 is what I recommend to anybody who has a Corrado. The other fluids can be checked here. This one here is the brake fluid, and this also feeds the clutch master cylinder. So if your clutch pedal gets wonky, you think you might have a fluid leak or the master cylinder's going bad, you can come in here and look at the fluid level, and if it's actually down here towards the marks on the master cylinder reservoir for the brake master, then you know that you've lost a bit of fluid there. The clutch comes in at about this level on this particular reservoir, and to check these I do that same thing. I shake the car, and as you can see, this one's right up here with the level. Looks like it might be easier to see on camera there. And then the coolant, the fill line is actually the split between the top and the bottom of the coolant bottle. I like to call this the golf ball. It's shaped more like a golf ball in other cars. And so yeah, you just fill it right up to that halfway point. You can go a little bit over, that's fine. But if it goes much below that, then you will get a blinking coolant light in your instrument cluster. Another thing worth going over is the radiator fans. These are not necessarily unique to the Corrado, but a unique sort of style. It's one fan motor driving 2 fans, and they're actually connected together by a little tiny belt on the front of the fan hubs. If you want to change that belt, you actually have to split the fan shroud from the radiator a little bit so you can reach down in there. But if you're buying a Corrado, you'll definitely want to check and make sure that that's there, and you can do that by moving one set of blades, and you can see the other set of blades is moving with it, and so we know that our belt's on there and functional. The fans do a couple of different things. If you turn your switch if you turn your HVAC switch to the air conditioning position, it will actually run the fans on a low speed. After you drive and you've had the engine up to operating temperature, after you exit the vehicle, the fans will cycle and run for approximately 10 minutes along with an auxiliary water pump on the engine, and that's to circulate coolant through the cylinder head. Because the VR6 is a very compact 6-cylinder engine, the heat soak, the heat rising and soaking into the cylinder head after an intense drive on a hot day, actually has the potential to warp the cylinder head in more extreme climates. And so VW's solution was to fit an auxiliary water pump, which is located over here underneath the EGR valve. It's like right under here. That cycles along with the fans for that 10 minutes to knock the engine temperature down. If you are a Corrado owner who has removed your air conditioning and you would like some auxiliary cooling, you can actually slide your heater slider or knob. The 93 and laters have a better looking dash in my opinion. But you turn the AC on. that's non-existent, and it'll at least run the fans for you, so you have some sort of auxiliary cooling if you're sitting in traffic, or maybe you're sitting in the staging lanes at the race area or what have you. Another thing that you can do with the fans is get a different fan switch. So up here next to the coolant reservoir, this is the fan control module, and these are known to go bad and give people problems, so this is one thing that you might have to give some attention to if you buy a Corrado. But you can also get different temperatured versions that cycle the fans on and off sooner, and that in combination with a low temp thermostat can give you much better oil temperature and coolant temperature. One more thing I'd like to mention about the VR6 specifically is you can't get an oil filter for these anymore at the auto parts store, or at least I haven't been able to in the areas that I've been in. The oil filter is actually this housing down here. It points at the ground, and it uses a cartridge type oil filter. So you spin off the plastic cup on the bottom, and then a paper element actually drops out, and then you replace that. Now, you can get these oil filters online. There's still plenty of places that you can obtain them. But if for some reason if that doesn't work out for you, a company by the name of Schimmel Performance, spturbo.com, I believe, a little shout out to you guys, they make a nice housing that accepts the spin-on style oil filter. And so you don't actually have to use the cartridge one if you don't want to. And of course, the SP Turbo oil filter housing has the appropriate provisions for adding a turbocharger, or if you want an extra oil pressure gauge or a different oil temperature sender, they got you covered. Yeah, after assessing this car today here as it sits, I'd say this is worth between $2,500 and maybe $3,500. It's a nice solid driver. There's some interior pieces missing, but the seats aren't as destroyed as they typically are, and there really isn't any rust on here, which is impressive for a Minnesota car, I must say. So this would be a good deal at $2,000 to $3,000. You know, the price on these seems to be appreciating, so if this is a car that you think you would want to get yourself into, now's the time to do it, because in another 5 to 10 years, it's gonna start getting up there. And I'd like to thank Mike Van for loaning us this Corrado today. I actually have 3 Corrados myself. Got my first one in 2003, and I've been broke ever since. But I've had a lot of fun. Doing it. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions, hit that comment box below. Check out the description. I got a website, doogielabs.com. And I have my build archives there from all of my vehicles, including the Corrados. And I have tips and suggestions. I also have a YouTube channel. You can search Doogie Labs or Doogie Rick on my YouTube. And I regularly do Corrado videos and help people out. I even had a guy who asked me, you know, how do you convert to a moonroof? I needed to do it and just did a video about it for him. And so it kind of became an instructional thing. So, and that's the thing about Corrados and VWs in general. I love this car community because, you know, people band together and we help each other out, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. If you make an honest effort into something, you're going to get reward out of your hard work. So enjoy. If you see one, give that owner some props, because it takes some hard work and patience to keep one of these up. But it's a piece of history, and it should be enjoyed. So if you liked this video and you'd like to see more like it, head on over to my channel. We're going to have more retro 90s car reviews coming up real soon.